All right, guys, I'm here at Counterculture, and today we're gonna go over the front squat, okay? The front squat is one of those exercises that not a lot of people like because it's incredibly uncomfortable, or they feel like they lack the mobility in either the wrists or the shoulders to achieve a good front rack position, and therefore front squat is not something they wanna train, or it's something that they can't train because of those issues. So today, I just wanna go through the front squat kind of from the perspective of just how I think of it when I'm squatting, how I approach the bar, the cues that I think about, and then we can kind of go into some programming and exercise variations of things that you can include in your training that should also carry over and cross over into helping improve your front rack position, okay? So in terms of the front squat, I try to keep it pretty simple. In terms of hand position or grip width, I think this is primarily going to come down to preference, okay? Now, if you're a weightlifter, you're obviously gonna need to use very specific grips for your sport. But if you're just front squatting to front squat for really pretty much any other context, grip width is gonna be primarily, again, sort of just up to you and whatever you prefer. Okay, so I personally like to use a narrower grip where my hands are pretty much all the way on the inside of the knurling. In fact, they are all the way on the inside of the knurling. Some people might be a little bit more comfortable sort of in the middle of the inside in the first ring here. Some people might even like to be a little bit wider than that, depending on shoulder flexibility, how big you are, those kinds of things. And again, maybe even if your sport requires you to hold a certain grip, okay? But really the first thing I like to do is just walk up to the bar and get a good grip on the bar. Now, I always aim to have a full grip when I'm front squatting. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I only get 3 fingers into there, 4 fingers for whatever reason. Maybe as the weight gets heavier, sometimes it starts to slip or whatever. But for the most part, I try to get a full grip on the bar, and I try to always teach my clients and athletes and those things with a full grip, okay? Keep in mind that as you're warming up, I already have weight on the bar. When you're just using the bar and when you have lighter weight on and you're trying to warm up, it's actually harder to get into the position because there's just no load or resistance to sort of create tension against. So again, even in your first couple warm-up sets, your front rack position might actually feel better as you warm up and as you get closer to your working weight because you just have more load. It's easier to kind of create, again, tension against the bar, especially if you're strong. First thing, grip. Second thing I'm gonna think about is sort of just walking so that I'm standing right in front of the bar, okay? The bar is close to my collarbone or sternum as I can get it, and then I'm gonna sort of squat down underneath it, and then I'm gonna think about pushing my shoulder blades forward as far as I can on my rib cage, which is gonna be shoulder protraction. So I'm gonna think about, again, really pushing my shoulders forward or flaring my lats, and then I'm gonna stand up so that the bar is actually just resting on the shoulders behind my delts, okay? So this is like a really good and stable front rack position right here. So I just kind of want to show that again, because what a lot of people try to do when they get under the bar is one, they don't get under the bar, they kind of try to approach it and then just wedge themselves underneath and they find themselves arching to try to kind of create tension, okay? So again, what that's gonna do is that's actually gonna extend your spine, pull your shoulder blades back. Walk up under it. As I bring my elbows underneath, I'm thinking about pushing my shoulders as far forward as I can, getting the bar right up against my throat, and then just standing up into it so it rests right on my delts, okay? Then I'm gonna step out, fix my feet, take my breath in, bend my knees and squat. Okay, that's it. That's all there is to it. Shoulders forward, squat under the bar, stand up into it, bend your knees and sit down, okay? Don't make it any more difficult than that. You don't need any more cueing than that. Again, most of you, you're trying to arch and extend too hard. It's taking your shoulder mobility away and it's putting more stress on your wrist than you need. Okay? So now we're gonna go over some exercises, some programming, things, little variations of things you can do to include in your programming to improve your shoulder mobility if shoulder mobility is indeed an issue and this cue did not work for you. There's actually some very simple adjustments that we can make to our pulling work in our programming that can also help us improve our shoulder mobility for our front rack position. I'm gonna use this Nautilus machine here to demonstrate, but just keep in mind that sort of the concepts that I'm talking about here, they apply to basically all of your rowing, so your horizontal or chin-ups, vertical pulling exercises. So lat pull downs, chin-ups, rows, all these different things. I really just want to talk about the shoulder mechanics, okay? A lot of people that struggle with a front rack or a front squat are also the people that where everything is kind of just squeezed back, okay? So they just have a lot of tension through their back. And so we can make some very simple adjustments to our pulling exercises to sort of get our shoulders in the position that we want them in. And I'm sure a lot of you guys are like, what does this have to do with the front rack? But I want you guys to think, okay, I'm probably training through the week. I still want to be able to train, right? So how can I change or modify the way that I'm doing things to help me solve the problem of my front rack in my front squat, if that is a problem? One of the biggest things with pulling work in general is that a lot of people try to keep everything arched and squeezed when they do their pulling work. So they always stay here, right? The problem is that limits, you guys can see that my shoulders are just kind of stuck down and back. And that's really what a lot of people are doing, is they're just focusing on arching or lifting their chest or kind of retracting or squeezing their shoulder blades back, which again is gonna create a lot of tension in your upper back, but you wanna be able to loosen that up and really let that shoulder blade come around the front of the rib cage. Again, just like we talked about in our front squat, my front rack, I need shoulder protraction. I want my shoulder to come forward on the rib cage. So when I'm doing my pulling work, when I'm doing my exercises in the gym, I want my shoulder to do the same thing, right? So as I'm pulling, I want my shoulder blade to pull forward and up on my rib cage. It's gonna give me a nice stretch through my back, and then I'm gonna pull down. So notice that I'm not arching and staying here. I'm staying relatively neutral through my torso. I'm not overthinking what I'm doing here, and I'm just letting the machine pull my shoulder blades forward and up. Okay, so into protraction and into some elevation. Okay, so again, it seems very simple and very basic, but it's a simple way to start improving the mechanics of the shoulders so that way you actually can improve the mobility for your front rack. Again, if that's something that you struggle with. And just in general and for shoulder health, just letting the scapula move properly. So as you pull the weight towards you, the scapula is gonna retract. As the weight goes away from you, the scapula is also gonna protract. Don't try to restrict and keep your shoulder blade locked back when you're doing your front squat and when you're doing your pulling work. So that's a simple adjustment that you can make to, again, exercises that you're probably already doing to improve the mobility of the shoulder and get some length into the tissues in your upper back and between your shoulder blades. So now we're gonna talk about some arm training and how we can make changes to our arm training to help improve the mobility of our upper back and our shoulders. Again, so that way we can hit a good front rack position. Curls are a really great exercise for this. Again, it's something we probably already do a lot of. So if we just choose a better variation for what we're trying to accomplish, it's gonna sort of hit two goals for us, right? Not only am I gonna get big, strong biceps, I'm also gonna improve the mobility of my shoulders as well, okay? So a lot of times when people are doing, again, bicep exercises, they're sort of taught to squeeze everything back and arch, okay? Now, again, if you're one of those people where you're kind of just chronically stuck here, then using a preacher curl is gonna be a really good option for me. What this is going to force me to do is, as you can see in my shoulder position, is when I set up for my preacher curl, I think about reaching my elbows forward, pushing my shoulder blades forward on my rib cage as I execute my curls, right? So you can see that this right here, that sort of position of shoulder flexion, okay, and elbow flexion is the exact position that I need in my front squat. So instead of doing curls where I'm gonna sort of squeeze and sort of arch some more, I can use a preacher curl, which is gonna force me to get my upper back into the position in the shape that I want it in, if improving the mobility of my shoulders is something that I'm trying to do. Okay, so again, if you are trying to improve your front rack mobility, if you're trying to improve your front squat, then using preacher curl variations to help get the flexibility in your upper back is going to be super key for you, and it's a simple change that you can make instantly. So another variation that we can use for our front squat, our front rack position, and improving our shoulder mobility is what's called a spider curl. Okay, so a spider curl is basically just going to be face down on the bench. Okay, so a lot of people, when they do their curls on a bench, they do them here, they do incline, and there's nothing wrong with this, right? There's nothing wrong with doing curls this way at all. They're great, okay? But again, if I'm trying to get some space and improve my shoulder mobility, what I can do, especially into shoulder flexion, is sort of just lean into the bench and let my shoulders just kind of wrap again around the bench, right? So I'm not arched, I'm not extended off the bench. I'm just kind of relaxed. My body weight is leaning into the bench. My upper back's relaxed, my shoulders are relaxed. And then from here, I can go into what's called a spider curl, okay? So again, this is gonna improve our shoulder flexibility and our shoulder range of motion to improve our front rack for our front squat. If I'm using dumbbells for this, I like to go pinky on the inside of the dumbbell, because as I lift the weight up, it's gonna force me to supinate more, which is gonna be more external rotation, which is what I'm gonna need for my front rack position, okay? So if I'm using dumbbells, I like to go pinky on the inside, especially if I'm trying to do supinated curls where my palm is gonna be facing my face, okay? You could take these a step further, and you could even rotate your neck and your head towards the arm if you wanna do single arm. Okay, so if you want to do single arm, you can just do them here. But same thing, keep the pinky on the inside, okay? So a couple curl variations. If you're trying to improve your front rack position, you're trying to improve your shoulder mobility for your front squat specifically, preacher curls and spider curls are going to be two of your go-to exercises that you are likely going to use in your programming to help get the position that you want. If the cue or technique changes that we did in the beginning of the video didn't work for you, you started introducing some of the different variations of exercises into your programming, you changed your pulling mechanics, you tried some different bicep exercises for a long enough period of time, say 3-4 weeks, you're not really seeing any changes. You really feel like, oh, you know what, my wrists are tight or my shoulders are really tight, then let's go ahead and just do a couple stretches as well, okay? The first one's gonna be just a wrist stretch. Very simple, very straightforward. Again, this is gonna be the number one area where people complain of tightness or tension, lack of mobility. So, very basic wrist stretch. Just wanna focus on keeping my elbows locked out, okay, or as extended. A lot of people can't even get into full elbow extension, so try to get your elbows extended, and then just leaning your body weight out over the front, stretching the underside of my wrists here, okay? Because again, we need wrist extension, or at least some wrist extension for our front squat. So I can hold this for time, or I can just do some reps, right? But once I achieve about 90 degrees, like I can get my wrist and my forearm about a 90-degree angle, I probably have plenty of wrist extension. But if you're somebody who your wrists are super tight, they're super immobile, a nice light wrist stretch will probably work wonders for you. 1 to 3 sets, you could do sort of like 5 to 10 reps. You could do more than that. You could just hold for time. You have a lot of options here. A very basic wrist stretch. You can also go fingers facing backwards and lean back. So this one's obviously gonna be a little bit more intense. Okay, so that's another way to do it. Wrist stretch there. And then of course, stretch the top of your wrists as well. So you're obviously not gonna be in this position for a front squat, but it's good to have that flexibility as well, okay? The other thing that I wanna show you is gonna be a stretch for your shoulders. It is called a butcher's block stretch, but I wanna show you how to do it correctly because a lot of people mess this up when they're trying to improve their shoulder mobility. If I'm trying to improve spinal extension, then you can do this exercise the way most people do it, and that's by arching their back, okay? So I'll kind of demonstrate here. You've probably seen this exercise before where elbows go onto the bench you can kind of go, hands on your head here. And then you can focus on sitting your butt back. And a lot of people in this position will then arch their back, right? So what I actually want to focus on is it's not really arching my back, sort of keeping my ribs pulled down. And now I actually get a much better stretch through my lats and triceps. So if you're trying to improve spinal extension, again, you can arch your back, you can try to pull your chest to the floor or whatever you want. But for my front rack position, again, I'm trying to get my shoulders forward, okay? And then stretch here. Try not to arch too much. You can even sort of posterior pelvic tilt or round your back a little bit to get into your shoulder blades or to get into your shoulders, so that way you don't arch, okay? So those are a couple basic stretches. Again, wrist stretches, because wrists are gonna be the number one area that people complain. The second one is to just be able to get your shoulders into flexion without extending your back or flaring your rib cage. So when you get into this stretch, just make sure you don't arch with it. Keep your ribs down. So those are gonna be a couple good stretches to help you improve your front rack position. All right, guys, so today we went over front squat. Try to keep this video very straightforward, very simple. We went over some cues and techniques. Let's review them quickly. Shoulders protracted, or push your shoulders forward and up when you're unracking the bar from the rack. Squat under the bar, stand up into it. Try to get a full grip. Grip width is gonna be primarily preference, okay? Now, when I'm looking at my programming, my exercises, things that I'm doing through the week, how am I doing all of the other stuff that I'm doing? Because it's not just what I'm doing when I'm front squatting. It's also, am I doing other things in my training that may be contributing to me being sort of tight or restricted through my upper back? Okay, so we talked about pulling mechanics, allowing the shoulder blade to actually move forward on the rib cage, protract. You can even call, you'll hear reach as well. So like actually reach your hand forward. So you're not gonna slouch, but you're gonna reach. Okay, so again, that brings our shoulder blades forward. It's gonna stretch the tissue between our shoulder blades and our upper back. And that's a really simple cue that we can make just to our pulling work, because a lot of people, when they do their pulling work, again, they wanna try to keep everything pulled down and back and extended, okay? Over time, it's gonna restrict and reduce your range of motion. So if you want a front squat, you need good range of motion and mobility in your shoulders, okay? Then we went into a couple different bicep curl variations. Again, just making sure that we're getting those shoulders in front of us, our shoulders in a little bit of flexion, our shoulders protracted, and our upper back like nice and round, get some space through our upper back. And then to top off here, we did some stretches, we did some wrist stretches, and we did some shoulder stretches, okay? Again, in terms of squatting and cueing, aside of just the upper back and front rack, just bend your knees and sit down with whatever stance width and toe out you prefer, okay? That's gonna be the number one cue for squatting. I think that pretty much covers it for this video. If you feel like there's anything we missed, anything I left out, anything you want me to go over, any future questions or anything like that, submit them below, shoot me a DM, put them in the comments, and we'll make more videos answering your guys' questions, going over different exercises and their techniques and giving you guys the full breakdown. I'll catch you guys next time.